free to examine, to question, to disagree. The subject of today's discussion are flying saucers only science fiction. The moderator of The Open Mind is Eric F. Goldman, professor of history at Princeton University and author of Rendezvous with Destiny and The Crucial Decade. To introduce the topic and guest for this week, here is Mr. Goldman.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We live, of course, in the space age, and since 1947 at least, that space age has been characterized by thousands of reports of unidentified objects in the air, flying saucers, as they are popularly called, or UFOs, unidentified flying objects, as they are known in more scientific circles. The responsibility for investigating these reports rests with a branch of the Air Force located in Ohio. And this official agency states that there is no persuasive evidence that genuine flying objects from another planet exist. But the popular belief in them in some quarter goes on and perhaps mounts. Very recently, a good many people around Exeter, New Hampshire, became very sure that something quite genuine was in our air. Well, the Open Mind is open-minded about this subject, too, and a panel to discuss it. Here to my far left, Mr. R. Leo Sprinkle, Assistant Professor of Psychology at the University of Wyoming. Here to my immediate left, Mr. John G. Fuller, author, journalist, and columnist for the Saturday Review, who has been engaged in extensive research into that alleged flying saucer episode in Exeter, New Hampshire. Here to my immediate right, D.H. Menzel, Director of Harvard College's Observatory. Next to Professor Menzel, Frank B. Salisbury, Professor of Plant Physiology at Colorado State University, much of whose research concerns possible life on Mars. And to my far right, Mr. J. A. Hynek, Chairman of the Astronomy Department and Director of the Linheimer Astronomical Research Center at Northwestern University. Mr. Menzel, Mr. Fuller has written about this particular Exeter, New Hampshire episode in the current Look magazine, and he concludes his account, after having told what this, that, and the other person has said, by saying, confidential comments made to me by Coast Guardsmen and military in the area support the layman's testimony and confirm the reports even of radar sightings and of scrambling by jet fighters. Collusion, hoax, or mistaken identity by so many people seems improbable. The continued official silence surrounding the subject of UFOs seems as mysterious as the Exeter story itself.
I haven't noticed any particular silence about the subject. The Exeter sightings seem pretty much run-of-the-mill to me, and as I've looked over the reports, both the official reports and the unofficial ones that you're referring to, I have found that the pattern is very similar to those in the many thousands of cases that I have examined in the Air Force files.
And you state in your book, The World of Flying Saucers, you state flatly, now that was up to 1963 when you published that.
That's right.
No fact so far determined suggests that a single unidentified flying object has originated outside our own planet, and that is your opinion as of 66, too.
That is correct, yes.
I was going to ask Dr. Menzel a question. I went up to Exeter for 24 days. I interviewed 60 people. I tape recorded 70 hours of tape. I cross-examined these people. I did not just interview them. I threw questions at them that would try to throw them off. I tried to disprove this. Now, were you up there in Exeter, Dr. Menzel, to investigate this?
No, I was not.
Well, why weren't you up there if you're so interested in it?
Because I don't have time to investigate every one of the cases, and I can ask you the same question about many of the other cases. You seem to have concentrated on this Exeter case.
I never had any experience with the UFOs before, but I did go up there with an open mind to try to examine, if necessary. If I could disprove it, I would have been glad to. But this was such a startling case in that the police officers who were involved with this cited it at below treetop level and watched it for 8 or 9 minutes while the two of them checked each other out, and 3 other civilians reported the same phenomenon within the hour and within a distance of, say, 6 miles.
I believe you said that the object was seen at a distance of 100 feet. Is that?
The initial sighting was below treetop level. Now, the trees were estimated to be at 70 feet. It came up behind those trees and then moved toward them and hovered 100 feet in the air. You're right, 100 feet in that case.
Did any of you other gentlemen read Mr. Fuller's piece, or do you know the facts of the Exodus?
I read it today, yes.
I read it also.
Would you comment, sir?
I was very impressed. It would seem to me that this would be the kind of a sighting that ought to be thoroughly investigated, because, and I'd like to hear Dr. Menzel's ideas about how it's run-of-the-mill. It seemed to me that it was not run-of-the-mill, that there was enough detail involved that it's pretty hard to imagine the planet Venus or a weather balloon or something like that, the usual explanations which must fit many of these sightings. I was tremendously impressed by the reproducibility almost, which you imply here. The one young lad went and sat out on the mountainside till he saw it again with his mother, and here would have been a chance for the Air Force or whoever was interested to move in and perhaps do something really scientific for a change instead of studying it after the fact, as we otherwise always have to do.
This is what I feel.
Well, by run-of-the-mill, I meant the disagreement between the two observers, the two police officers. One of them said 100 feet, and that seems to be the person that you have quoted. But the other one said 9,000 feet away and possibly 2 to 3 miles. Well, and this is in exactly the same place in the official report.
Well, now, Dr. Menzel, could I say this? I tape recorded the two policemen on the spot, and I had them reenact everything that went on. He did not say 9,000 feet. He said it was just immediately over the trees when the second policeman, Patrolman David Hunt, arrived. Now, in the official report from the Air Force, do you recall how they explained this?
Explained what?
How they explained this sighting? The Air Force, what the official Air Force report was?
This is very close to an Air Force base, and I know that there was some operation in the neighborhood. Dr. Hynek, I think, would be, who has investigated the case more closely than I, would be able to...
The Air Force reported it as Operation Big Blast, a high-altitude exercise from Westover Field, Massachusetts, between the hours of 12 midnight and 2 a.m. on September 2nd, 1964. The sighting took place on September 3rd, 1964, at 3 a.m. 65, I'm sorry, I apologize on that. Now, the Air Force, the two policemen, when they got this report from the Air Force, and when it was released to the local papers, were furious. They wrote two letters to Major Quinton Miller of the Wright-Patterson Air Defense Command Foreign Technology Division, and they asked him to please immediately write and withdraw this report because it implied that they had no sensibilities, that they were incapable of discerning the difference between a plane or a planet or a high-altitude exercise. Patrolman Bertrand was in the Korean War for 4 years. He refueled from KC-97 tankers. He knew every plane not only by sight but by sound. He knew helicopters. He attempted to place this object within the category of conventional aircraft. He did everything he could to it. When David Hunt arrived, about 4 to 5 minutes after Lieutenant Bertrand incidentally threw himself on the ground and began to pull his gun because the thing came so close to them, Lieutenant Bertrand did everything he could to rule out the possible things. The three of them, an 18-year-old boy, Patrolman David Hunt, Patrolman Eugene Bertrand, sat there for between 8 and 9 minutes and tried to rule everything out. Now, the Pentagon, after the second letter arrived from these policemen, the Pentagon, as of yesterday, finally wrote to Eugene Bertrand and David Hunt and apologized because they could not identify this object. Now, I want to get these facts absolutely straight.
Now, excuse me, let me get this straight. As of this letter, the position of the official agency having to do with is that they do not have this one explained.
Now they don't, but they first explained it.
The first statement was that they did explain it.
It was all the persistence of these two policemen which made them withdraw their explanation.
Mr. Hynek, would you come in here, please?
Yes, I spent 2 days last week at Wright Field on this case,
And one thing immediately rules out the big blast operation. That is that all the planes from that were down by 1:35.
Yeah, that's what it is.
And this was due to some misunderstanding earlier. The Pentagon office had not the exact times on the sighting, and this was pointed out, and I called Lieutenant Brandt, who had been one of the men from Pease Air Force Base, to come down. And certainly from the manner in which they reported it, I don't see, in this case, at least, how it could have been B-47.
No, they ruled that out. I mean, they saw B-47 and compared it. Yeah.
It's rather interesting. I should say, Mr. Goldman, that although I've been the Air Force investigator, no, that's incorrect. I've been consultant to the Air Force for the last 18 years on this subject. I am not here this evening speaking for the Air Force, but as an astronomer.
As an astronomer, yes.
Well, during those 18 years of reports, one of the things that has interested me, and I'm not sure whether it occurred in this case or not, but is what you might call the escalation of interpretation. The better reports, generally, the man will try to explain it as something perfectly natural. For instance, in the Monticello case,
you mean the man who sees it?
The man who sees it.
Yeah.
There are first four people there. First thought it was blinker lights from a car on the road. They thought there had been some accident. That was explanation one. Explanation two was, well, it was a little too high, therefore it's probably a plane coming in to crash. And in that particular case, the little girl in the back seat was so frightened that she just toppled over and covered her head. And then they strove to find another interpretation. By the way, these were two graduate students in anthropology at the University of Wisconsin, quite articulate. The thing was very similar, actually, to the Exeter case, similar to the Toledo case, similar to the Rodeo, New Mexico case. In every case, we have a phenomenon that exists. I'll go that far, but I will not go to jump from that. A phenomenon exists to a tremendous jump that we're being visited from outer space.
I wouldn't
Excuse me, Mr. Sprinkle, you haven't commented yet.
I'd like to say that in one respect I agree with Professor Menzel's point of view that this is a run-of-the-mill report. I wasn't at the scene, and so I haven't had an opportunity to investigate personally, but I've read many, many reports. And I'd say it's run-of-the-mill in this sense that something is happening and people are reporting these things. Yet the interpretation I place on what is run-of-the-mill might be quite different, because it seems to me that there are so many sightings which must be interpreted in various ways. There seem to me to be four tenable hypotheses. One, UFO reports are statements from persons who sense known phenomena and perceive them as unknown phenomena. Two, reports are statements by people who are attempting to defraud others by making false claims. Three, the reports are statements by persons who are perceiving unknown phenomena based upon internal psychic stimuli or from other persons, psychic projections. Or fourth, they're sensing and perceiving unknown phenomena, which may be extraterrestrial phenomena. And it seems to me that although one and two hypotheses explain many reports, they do not explain all. And it seems to me that there's not sufficient evidence to reject any one of these hypotheses, particularly for a large number of group sightings, as opposed to looking at individual sightings. And therefore, as a psychologist, it's of interest to me, regardless of what the explanations are, because something is happening. To me, it'd be a more fantastic world to have psychic projections make objects appear in the sky that others see than it would be to have a world in which could be visited by other worlds. But whichever explanation it is, I'm interested in it.
Listen here, why haven't psychologists taken more of an interest in this?
Why haven't psychologists studied parapsychology or hypnosis? They're afraid.
Afraid of what?
Why haven't astronomers made more of it?
He said afraid. I'm curious about that. You're afraid of...
Psychologists base much of their work, this is my opinion, I don't speak for all psychologists on this, obviously. I think that they attempt to base their work upon that which has been true of biologists, and biologists, in my opinion, have based their approach on that done by physicists. And I think that this is one reason why there's an interesting description by a man named Frank saying that what is right, what is good, what is moral is perceived to be based on what we believe the world to be like. And we believe the world to be like what we see in the sky and the physical laws. It seems to me that the reason why psychologists have been so far unwilling to investigate these things is because the present scientific knowledge says that there ain't no such thing as other intelligent beings.
Well, gentlemen, beneath all of the discussion so far has been the implication on the part of some of you that the government, the official agency of the Air Force having to do with investigating these, is, let us say, reluctant to take them seriously, even if they should be taken seriously. Now, I notice, Mr. Menzel, that in your book, The World of Flying Saucer, you maintain, let me quote you directly, if a spaceship came, no one would be more eager to acknowledge it than our government officials. You take the different point of view. All governments would feel it necessary to protect the human race if necessary, and to establish diplomatic relations with the alien race if possible. Mr. Fuller, I think you have the opposite feeling, don't you? For some reason, the government...
I feel that either they don't know, or they know, they don't know, and they are afraid to admit that, or that they do know a lot more than they've released, and they are afraid of disruption if it is true. It's one of those two things. I don't know.
No, I think the actual governmental point of view, and I can speak to it because I have never been an official consultant to the Air Force, but I can see the pattern as I've studied it through the last 15 years or so. The Air Force is not definitely concerned with flying saucers from outer space, but they are seriously concerned with any threat to our national security. And they're also interested in knowing what possible potential enemy powers may be doing. Therefore, when they see something bright moving through the sky, they want to know what it is. And I know that whenever there is an area that is at least a bit critical, I'm sure there must be a lot of flying saucers reported over South Vietnam at the present time. These things that would be called flying saucers, because we've been concentrating, I think, far too much on the Exeter case. This is just one case.
Oh, I realize
many
that.
thousands.
It's the latest to be written.
But the interesting thing about it was that I took a microcosm where a rather alarming and officially documented case was, and went into it in depth. And this is not done too often. They reported from all over. But I went up there expecting to find one case. I tracked down about 8 leads on the police blotters and ended up with 60 people who were reliable people. They weren't nuts. I mean, this is one fear I have. I hate these nuts and kooks involved with this. These were average or better than average intelligence. They were reliable citizens of the area. They not only had seen them, but I concentrated then on low level, below treetop level, down to 5 or 6 feet off the ground. The reports now. I'm a journalist enough to not say this is the report they got. And I have here 203 pages of transcriptions of cross-examinations of these people. And I think if you read these cross-examinations, you would find that this many people you couldn't possibly be either psychic or that inaccurate in the reports that they got. Now that's what I can report.
Mr. McKenna, I'd like to raise a question in regard to the same question, that is of concentrating not only on individual case, but also on patterns or groups of cases. I'm surprised, and I wondered if Professor Menzel would be willing to comment on the fact that Michelle's book, The Straight Line Mystery, is not discussed in your book, and yet I believe that it was a 58 book, so there would have been time for you and Mrs. Boyd to have What is your reaction to the straight line mystery?
I don't know that book. For the benefit of our audience, what is the book about?
My interpretation would be that Michel, a Frenchman engineer, has found a very interesting datum. Or using many data, he has found a very interesting observation, and that is that UFO sightings, as reported by various persons
In France.
in France, these reports, when a map is used to place pins corresponding to the places where the UFOs are sighted, these can be the points along which lines can be drawn. At first he wasn't sure whether these were mathematically straight lines or whether they were circles on the Earth, and so he called it orthotony or something like this. Now apparently he has concluded that these lines correspond to circles on the Earth, and I wondered what your reaction to this finding is.
Well, have looked into it carefully from the mathematical standpoint. I'm well aware of this book. I didn't consider it sufficiently important to go into it when Mrs. Boyd and I wrote our book on the world of flying saucers, but people criticized me for passing it by, so I did give a very thorough and scientific analysis to his contention. Now let me state precisely what it is that he does. He takes all of the sightings that are reported in certain French newspapers from the hour of midnight to the following day. And he plots the point where the observer was at the moment he saw the flying saucer. Not where this supposedly the flying saucer was, but where the observer was when he saw it. And then he has maybe 10, 15, 20, 30 sightings covering all of France. He discovers that, to his surprise, that he can draw straight lines connecting 3 points, sometimes 4, sometimes even more of these. Well, I found that you can take a dozen catnip seeds, throw them onto a map of France, confine them within the same boundaries, and you can draw exactly the same set of straight lines. It's a purely random.
Did you also follow up what he found and concluded in 1962, and that is that many of these sightings conform to an earthly circle?
There is absolutely not enough data in his observations to justify that contention.
When you say absolutely, does that mean then that you still regard this as a mystery, or you regard this as no mystery?
No mystery. It's just one of those sort of hallucinations that I'm afraid that...
This is one thing that interests me very much, because not only because of my background, but also because I belong to a couple of organizations studying hypnosis and parapsychology. I wonder to what extent hallucinations and illusions and delusions can be used to explain these sightings, or to what extent they can be used to explain away these sightings.
Well, are you still on the orthotony problem now, or something else? Because in the case of...
Well, you used the term hallucination. I wondered what you mean.
It's a self-hallucination that you see all of these straight lines, and you begin to believe that these straight lines must be real, when actually you can show that they're due entirely to chance.
Well, he has one set of 6 points that are pretty impressive. I talked to him in '62, and he told me about this world business. And I talked to him in '64, and he wasn't so sure anymore. But it is an interesting phenomenon, because he tried to do one thing that would be valuable, I believe, and that is he tried to do something objective where you didn't have to believe the witness. You simply tried to see if there was some relationship.
Or disbelieve the witness.
Dr. Menzel, I violently disagree with your book, but I do agree with you in this case, only because there hasn't been enough scientific study on the subject, and it seems to me that with such a massive amount of statistics, not only Exeter but everywhere else, that the professors of astronomy should be eager to set out with a good, solid program and really disprove it. I don't care what you do, but to go out enthusiastically to prove or disprove.
Well, this brings us back again to this question of the attitude of the official agency which is responsible for saying to the public, let's take this seriously or let's not take this seriously. Mr. Hynek, I think you've had most experience with that particular phase of things. How would you describe the attitude of that agency?
Well, for the amount of work that they've been able to do on these things, first of all, the Air Force is not primarily a scientific organization. Their charge, as Dr. Menzel pointed out, is the defense of the country. There are something like 2 reports per day, and if they were to be investigated in depth with the relatively small group they have, well, this would be impossible.
There are, may I understand that there are 2 reports of alleged flying saucer episodes, or 2 people reporting?
No, two reports per day. Sometimes there are many people reporting a given case.
Yeah.
Yes, 2 cases a day.
2 cases a day, yeah.
And let me emphasize that UFOs, as far as I'm concerned, exist as reports. They are reports. And the question is now, what is the stimulus that gives rise to that report? I would like to pause in this remark now and ask the question here as to the question of hallucination has come up. I think we were faced in this in many respects after 18 years of looking at this. We're faced with a poverty of hypotheses. It's either considered complete bunk on one hand, or we're being visited by space people on the other. Surely we should be ingenious enough to think of other hypotheses. What is the status in psychology of mass hallucination? How many people can be mass hallucinated to see the same thing?
This is a good question, and I don't believe that I'm an expert on this, and I don't believe there is about anyone else who is, as far as I know from the literature. This is one reason why I've recently become interested in parapsychology and also in hypnosis, wondering if the literature in these areas of knowledge might give some clues as to how so many people who apparently are emotionally upset can describe with great detail the same thing. It seems to me that there are only 2 good hypotheses in this respect, and that is either there are many people who are good actors who are involved in a conspiracy, or else there's some kind of psychic projection going on between one person, another person, and then something appears based upon one person's illusion or hallucination that others are able to participate in. And to me, this is a very interesting world, if it could be that way.
I've even heard, and this is, I think it was reported in the National Observer, but I'm not even sure of that, that in these experiments with the LSD drugs and so forth, that one person had a hallucination, and 2 people with whom this person was in close friendship, close contact, but geographically separated, had the same identical hallucination. Do you know whether anything like that's ever been documented?
Not in terms of LSD, although I'm familiar with Bloom's book in this regard, but I am familiar with some cases in which experimentally persons are able to call out cards which correspond with cards that are being turned over by other persons.
But this is quite a different story from the whole picture,
right.
The whole thing.
Well,
one of the things that I've been very much interested in, the reports are interesting in themselves. There is a phenomenon, but I'm really more interested in a way in the people who make the reports. There's a spectrum of reports and a spectrum of reporters. And sometime this hour, I hope you will give me permission to read just a few quotes from letters from...
Why don't you do it now? I think it's quite relevant at this stage.
Because, all right, like I say, just happen to have them along. I think the human side of this thing tends to be missed occasionally because the reporters are, in general, I found, quite sincere people who are honestly puzzled, and you'd be quite surprised if I could mention publicly some of the rather prominent people who have, this will puzzle me. We have a phenomenon. As I said before, I simply cannot get myself to believe as an astronomer. I agree with Dr. Menzel completely. I just can't see the point how we can be... Well, if there were spaceships, it seems to me that radar would pick them up, all our satellite surveys.
does pick them up.
Well, we'll come back. Let's come back to that.
Later.
Since I have to make let me
stay on the
on the unradar beam.
Sure, get back.
Yeah.
All right. Here's one. During World War II, I was a pilot in the U.S. Air Force, and all my flying experience in continental limits. In all that time, I never once night or day observed anything unusual in the skies. Now, at the age 43, I have observed phenomena which are beyond my comprehension and which tax my sense of reasoning and credulity. I am postmaster here at Baker, and I hesitated before repeating the subject to the postal inspector, but after a great deal of serious thinking, I felt that I could not be a good American citizen if I did not ask these questions. What was the lighted object and where did it come from? Here's another man who was prompted to report his sighting after hearing of other sightings. He was very anxious to have his name withheld from the press due to his business position. Here's another one. This phenomenon was witnessed by 4 other persons who will substantiate this report. Believe me, this was no hallucination or mirage. It was real. Another one here. Gentlemen, are you afraid to answer this letter? Willing to divulge what it was? No, I do not think it was hostile or armed. It left no vapor trail. What moved it, I do not know. If you do not know what this was, for God's sakes, is it not time you found out? Gentlemen, I challenge you to answer this letter. Frankly, though, I never expect to hear from you. This was addressed to the Secretary of the Air Force. Did you hear from me? That's not my department. Now, here's another one addressed to the U.S. Air Force Chief of Staff. No one in authority will listen to my description of them. I have been told they do not exist, that they were an optical illusion. But I know better. I saw them. They do exist. If there was just a telephone number we could call when these things are sighted, then stations in the direction they are going could be alerted.
That's an interesting suggestion.
All right, now, this has to do with... These people are all, as you say, responsible people, or reasonably responsible.
Those that I have talked to personally on the phone or have visited, I have found remarkably articulate and head screwed on in that direction.
This leads to your further puzzlement.
Yes, I'm puzzled.
But you say you agree with Mr. Menzel here that from the physical point of view, you simply, as an astronomer, you simply cannot accept.
I can't accept these right-angle turns, for instance. Newton's laws have not been abrogated.
Yeah. And you bring up the question now, which I do wish we could move to now. Mr. Salisbury, would you move us to that? All right, now, in the physical area, the radar pickup and so forth.
Well, that isn't exactly what I had in mind, but it's closely related. I got into this in a different way. I'm a biologist, but I took a course in geochemistry at Caltech from Harrison Brown and had to write a paper about life on Mars in 1962. And I've been interested in the subject ever since, and there haven't been very many biologists who have wondered about the markings on Mars and what they might mean and the possibilities that there could be life there and so on. And I've had a lot of fun doing this, and it's completely speculation. The only real conclusion that I have is that we have no conclusions and that we have to wait until we land something there or get some much better pictures or something before we can really decide, although it's possible to argue in favor of life on Mars, some sort of vegetable life that accounts for the markings and their change in color and so on. We're doing experiments now that show us that plant life, even as we know it here on the Earth, is much more hardy than we'd ever imagined and can stand extremely severe conditions that previously we just assumed would be fatal. Well, I got to this point, and it was lots of fun. And then it turns out that there are some other observations. The canals of Mars that have been discussed since 1877, what do they mean? Are they real, and are they earthquake cracks, or what are they? Are they some sign of intelligence? And, there's possibility that they could be a sign that there's intelligence on Mars. And this is the best known aspect of the whole picture. But we've also seen flares on Mars that are very puzzling and difficult, very much like the flying saucers in a way, because they don't fit into our picture of the physical universe. They're too bright and too short to be volcanoes, and a little too long in duration to be meteorite impacts, too frequent to be meteorite impacts, I suppose, of that magnitude. What are they? We haven't any idea. The satellites of Mars are extremely interesting. They're different from the other satellites in the solar system that we've known. They're smaller. They have circular orbits in the plane of the Martian equator.
Speaking as a physiologist, you feel that there are a lot of things in this unexplained category that are, if you will, similar to the lack of
let me
explanation.
conclude the point of it is, I believe Dr. Menzel and what Dr. Hynek has just expressed, to them the idea of intelligence on some other planet close enough to visit us seems very unlikely in terms of the picture that they've developed. But I had developed a different picture, namely that there could be intelligence on Mars, realizing fully that when we get there, these phenomena might have some other explanation. But now the conclusion that's usually stated against intelligence on Mars is, if they launch those satellites, which are huge in terms of artificial objects, if they built that canal system, they ought to be able to visit us. And if they could, they would. Obviously, they would want to land on the White House lawn and say, "Take me to your leader." Well, the argument is, since they haven't, therefore they don't exist. And I'm not sure this is a valid argument. If they were intelligent, I suppose they could have their reasons for not wanting to contact us directly. Maybe they're waiting for a Republican administration or something like that. They could have some sort of reason for not wanting to make this formal contact. And I asked myself the question at this stage in 1962, is there any evidence that they might be observing us? And that's what got me into this story. But I just want to explain that it's possible to get into this story from a different standpoint, where it does seem reasonable, if you're willing to speculate and not take it too seriously, to consider the idea that we could be visited from outer space. To me, this is not so unlikely as you imply.
Well, now, moving to the next stage in this, then, we've talked about some of the human aspects of this, and the related studies which can lead not to explanation, but to the feeling that there are a lot of unexplained things. We haven't discussed this sheer physical end of the thing. Now, Mr. Fuller, I gather you feel strongly that there are some physical mysteries about this.
As a reporter now, and I'm way out below these fellows' class in the science end, but as a reporter, and I think a reporter has a valid position here, I feel that there are definite physical manifestations, which I don't think Dr. Menzel's book, I think you give them sort of short shrift, if I may say so right now. First, there are pictures which have been taken, and you can't hallucinate a camera. Second, there are many radar reports. Third, the effect of animal behavior is constantly repetitious. Dogs cowering and howling and going to corner, horses and cattle kicking up and consistently reported. And next, the electrical disturbances like ignitions of cars, radios, and television interference, and lights going out. Now, again, I am not a UFO expert, but I must say that I've done more research in one particular case than I've heard any astronomer doing. And also, I have one other thing to say, and that is these objects, especially in the Exeter area where I only had the opportunity of exploring, the reports were all low level. I don't think they didn't have much to do with astronomy. I mean, 100 feet or below treetop level is not an astronomer's area.
Mr. Menzel, would you comment on this sheer physical aspect of things now?
Yes, I'd like to comment on a number of things that Mr. Fuller has said. First of all, his statement, you can't hallucinate a camera. I think that's probably true, but the man who is behind the camera can certainly produce a lot of things, and there is quite possible to get all kinds of internal reflections in a camera, or the shutter can stick, or you can get double exposures. And this picture that you, I think, are about to show me happens to be, I think, a double exposure, and isn't so admitted.
That, though, but did you were you out there? Did you speak to James Lucci?
No, I did not.
Did you speak to his brother?
I did
his
not.
His father, his neighbors, the police, his school principal, the newspaper reporters, the newspaper photographers in the area? Did you spend 2 days out there checking them? Did you check the area? Did you make a circle around the area and talk to over 40 people? Asking, did they see the light? And did you get identical
Mr. Fuller,
those people? I just want to know, because
I have already said that I did not go up there.
documentation is the most important thing in this kind of thing.
I
don't think you fellows are doing your job. That's what I'm saying. That's all.
This is not my job, first of all.
Excuse me just a minute. I think this is the picture we're talking about. Well, I don't think the camera can get that, no. So there's no point.
Oh, he says yes.
Well, that picture had nothing to do with...
No, but I took it as a control point on the Exeter cases and went out there and checked. Spent 2 full days out there.
Well, let's get to this,
expense.
where I cut you gentlemen off. There's not only running beneath the discussion the feeling that the government isn't doing what it should be doing. It's not really being candid or something or another. But there is this constant feeling that came up openly here now, Mr. Menzel, that the astronomers ought to get in there and study this thing more carefully. Is that what it boils down to?
I think so.
It so happens that Mr. Hynek and I are probably about the only astronomers who've devoted any time to it, and I think probably we both agree we devoted too much time to it from the astronomical standpoint, because I think it has very little to do with astronomy. There's a lot to do with physiological optics, meteorological optics, and probably also psychology. But you keep talking about this distance of 100 feet. This, to me, does not sound at all well established.
Less than 100 feet.
Or even less than 100 feet. This is only a conclusion of the observer. And at that distance, looking up, I've seen observers, many well-trained observers who are not hysterical to start with, as apparently these 2 observers were, who...
I think you should not say
please
that.
Let me...
I don't think you should say that. You're making an absolute unfounded and unsubstantiated statement. You said these two observers...
Mr. Menzel finish, and then we'll come
Well, in
back.
defense of the 2 policemen and the 3 other people who saw that night, I think that's an indefensible statement to make without talking to them.
I say that... Will you please let me finish?
Yeah.
I'd like to finish and say that it is impossible for anyone, you or the most qualified observer, to estimate distances looking straight up beyond 100, at the order of 100 feet. Now, one observer says that it was 100 feet, and the other said 9,000 feet.
Sir, you did not check that. I did. He did not say 9,000 feet.
Didn't it hover in front of the trees?
It hovered. It came up from behind the trees, then came over the field.
Was it in front of a background which would establish its distance? If it's in the sky, you can't tell.
No, it was behind it first, and then it moved, and he said almost touched the roof.
I must support Dr. Menzel on that, because in the reports that were made to the Air Force, at least, one of them, Hunt said 100 feet, or not 100 feet. The other one said 9,000 feet in the report. I have it right here.
Now, you say when you interview them, they
when I
did not
interviewed
say.
and when they walked through this, and I made them walk through it twice, and I tape recorded every word they said, and I watched their reactions to check their hopes. I checked their character. I checked their neighbors. You see, I consider myself a responsible reporter. I'm sticking my neck out to get... If I don't write about UFOs, I'm sticking my neck out to write a story like this in a big circulation magazine or the Saturday Review. These are responsible publications. When I got halfway through this research, I came down and I asked them to send a Look senior editor up to recheck my interviews, to spot check them, because I wanted confirmation by another experienced reporter. They sent Gary Zimmerman up from Look, who came up, and he went right around in my tracks to double-check what I said. Publications like this in the Saturday Review, like Look in the Saturday Review, don't do this sort of thing. We don't stick our necks
Mr. Menzel, there's a question here of fact. For you referred to these 2 men who are key to his story as hysterical, and he objects to that.
I do.
Why do you refer to them as hysterical?
It was certainly clear from the whole picture that the man was frightened to death, and he became hysterical.
Which man?
Everybody
I talked to there.
Gentlemen, there's obviously a complete clash in interpreting what these men were like.
I refuse to be subject to an inquisition here. Now, you...
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
I'd like to speak to this question about hallucination and hysteria and so forth. It seems to me that depending upon one's definition of what these conditions are like, that it is just as unscientific to postulate these conditions without examination as it is unscientific for me to say, because I have seen 2 phenomena that I couldn't understand, that this right away as something. Twice, in the presence of some other person, I have seen something I couldn't identify. And one was very interesting to me because in the summer of '56, my wife and I were returning from Denver, came over a hill, saw what we thought was Venus, bright in the western sky. We marveled at its brightness, and then suddenly it started to move. And that was unusual in our experience, and so we stopped the car and got out. And as we did, we topped the hill overlooking Boulder, Colorado, and either the light had dropped, or else as we topped the hill, we could see that the light was between us and the Flatiron, so that I assumed it wasn't Venus, although I'm not an astronomer, so I don't know whether Venus can drop down over Boulder, Colorado. And there was light enough when we first saw it that I couldn't distinguish balloon or helicopter or anything, and the hovering and the movement suggested that it wasn't responding to wind unless wind was very variable, and so forth. Now, there are many possibilities, and I recognize that I'm not qualified in terms of meteorological or astronomical phenomena to suggest what is or what is not true, but nevertheless it suggests to me that there is a mystery.
Well, on this grounds, this matter of mystery, Mr. Salisbury, could I turn to you on this? The implication in so much of this literature is that if people really wanted to find out whether there is anything to this or not, there could be arranged, let us say, a team of scientists of the proper kind. Perhaps, as Mr. Menzel said, this is not fundamentally an astronomer's problem. It's in other fields. Now, you spoke of the reproducibility of these situations. If there is a certain reproducibility in it, do you see any conceivable way whether this matter could be settled once and for all? If the government or a foundation or somebody or another wanted to set up a situation to do it.
Well, this has been the big problem. There hasn't been any reproducibility. You get an account here, and then several months later somewhere else. And but in this particular case, it looked like maybe if we'd have gone up there and sat around and watched, like a few of the people did, we could have done something sensible in the way of, we could get cameras with very large apertures and sensitive film and sit there and wait and try and expose them properly so they're not blurs, and see if we get pictures of what's seen and so on.
So from the scientific
it would have
point
been
of
a
view,
chance to do something of this sort, and I suppose the chance might arise again if we were all ready to go.
The reports were still continuing when I left.
Mr. Menzel, would you agree with that from a scientific point of view one could?
I agree that we certainly could do a lot more toward scientific investigation of the phenomena of flying saucers than we have. But I would certainly like to come back to this question of hallucinations and cameras, because there have been many hoaxes, and there have been many unintentional hoaxes because of internal reflections in cameras, and it's very questionable just to believe what you see on a camera film just because the camera has recorded it.
The only good ones have a good story to go with it, I think.
Well, I think that probably
a picture by itself surely has no value. I've got some in my briefcase that I spent all last week faking.
In fact, most of the hoaxes we had at Wright Field have been accompanied by photographs.
I don't count a photograph at all.
But you know, you mentioned...
This is why I spent so much time out there trying to check it out.
A moment ago, you took Dr. Menzel to task, or the astronomers in general, for not fulfilling their duty in studying these. And I must side here with Dr. Menzel in saying that science doesn't work this way. Scientists do what they want. If they were really interested, they'd do it. If they were interested and motivated, why, they'd be studying it. And I think the thing to do is to get them interested.
Well, now, on this matter of should they take it seriously, and could I bring up this association so that our audience will have the estimate of you gentlemen. There's an association called the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, of which Miss Carol Lorenzen is the director. I read some of the book, and this lady is very worried. She says it is the author's serious contention that mankind is on the brink of space-borne catastrophe. The evidence at hand is of such magnitude and portent that she cannot with conscience ignore or withhold it. What kind of an organization is this? Is this some form of hysteria? Is this what?
If it is, I'm part of it because I belong to the organization, and I myself have been interested
The book I'm referring to is this The Great Flying Saucer Hoax. Yeah.
From my acquaintance, which is brief, with Mr. and Mrs. Lorenzen, I'm very impressed not only with their sincerity but also with their work. And also I might say this, we've been talking about scientific investigation, and I believe also, well as with the book, Jacques Vallée has suggested various kinds of investigators might be a part of a team, and I think that's very good. But I also believe that it requires the cooperation of many people, and in this sense, I think that the more public is aware of the information and is regarded as part of a cooperative venture, but this is all to the good. I recently completed a study concerning people who are interested in UFO reports, and find that with this particular sample, the average years of education in this group, 14 years, although they scored differently on dogmatism than psychologists and guidance workers, they're still within what might be called the average range. They are in the middle, upper middle, and lower middle classes. These people, at least insofar as group characteristics are concerned, represent to me the kind of people that we want in many endeavors, and it seems to me that they ought to be included, these kinds of people ought to be included in any kind of scientific investigation.
Mr. Hynek, would you agree with his general estimate of, Mr. Sprinkle's general estimate of the Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization?
I believe so. From what little I know of it, I suppose any organization has a wide spectrum of people in it, but I would think I would agree. I'm very glad you brought up this whole point of scientists paying more attention to it, because you asked several times, why don't astronomers and scientists pay more attention? Well, even though UFO is only a three-letter word, it is a dirty word as far as scientists are concerned. And in general, serious scientists have not been aware or cared to become aware of the UFO phenomenon, if you might call it, because it's always been the subject of ridicule, banter, and raillery. Right. Always good for a laugh or a snicker. And the reason, of course, it's been the subject of ridicule and banter and so forth is that precisely because scientists have paid no attention to the phenomenon. And scientists have paid no attention to the phenomenon because it is an object of ridicule. It's a vicious circle.
Well, because the Air Force had anything to do with it being an object of ridicule. Well, that's what worries me. Don't we ignore it because we think, well, they're taking care of it, and they say that there's nothing to it, so that's that.
I think I can meet that one by saying that I've, as a consultant of the Air Force, I have now strongly recommended to the Air Force directly that a panel of scientists be set up, not only astronomers and physicists, but psychologists and various, to study the total UFO phenomenon, not whether we're being visited or not, but the first step there is that people have got to do some homework. I've looked at these things for 18 years, over 10,000 reports, and I'm still puzzled. We talked.
I've received here a 1-minute signal where we're about to go off the air. Is this something that you would go along with as a sensible suggestion, Mr. Menzel?
There's one point that I'd like to make in conclusion, and this is that there are hundreds and probably thousands of different kinds of flying saucers, and they have natural explanations in terms of natural phenomena, in terms of reflections from material objects.
You don't think this scientific group is necessary?
Well, I think that it could help in the elucidation of some of the more erudite varieties, many of which I've investigated myself.
I'm sorry, gentlemen. I do have to take us off the air. Thank you very much, Mr. Sprinkle, Mr. Fuller, Mr. Menzel, Mr. Salisbury, and Mr. Hynek. Thank you for being with us, ladies and gentlemen, and goodbye for this week.
WNBC-TV has presented The Open Mind, moderated by Eric F. Goldman, Professor of History at Princeton University. Today's distinguished panel has been discussing Are Flying Saucers Only Science Fiction? This has been a WNBC-TV Public Affairs presentation. This program was pre-recorded.